Coming up on today's show, I teamed up with my guy, Chase Sr., the host of the San Francisco 49ers Report, and we have an in-depth preview. And I'm going to tell you how the New York Giants can win this game. We've got some major injury news to discuss. And if you've been enjoying our joint previews here at Chat Sports, hit that thumbs up icon. And if you want to beat the 49ers, hit the like button.
All right, welcome into the show. I'm Chase Sr., host of the 49ers Report. To my right, that is Marshall Green, host of Giants Now. We're going to preview this Niners-Giants game, which is coming up at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. We'll both be live doing watch parties for our respective channels on the 49ers Report and Giants Now. And what we want to do with this show is just preview this game and give fans from both fan bases insight as to what to expect for this ball game from San Francisco and from the Giants. And Marshall, as you know, I've watched a lot of Giants games this year, and compared to years prior, this team is more competitive. They have more of an edge. They're a lot more physical. They're a feisty team, but they are coming off back-to-back losses. That crazy defeat against the Denver Broncos where they gave up, 30-plus points in the fourth quarter?
33 points in the fourth quarter.
33 points in the fourth quarter, and then they lose last week in a game to the Philadelphia Eagles where the whistle wasn't necessarily on their side, but they gave up 250-plus rushing yards. And so with where the Giants are now, you didn't expect them to be really a playoff team this year, but how is the fan base feeling about this team at 2-6 going into Week 9?
Yeah, I would say the vibes right now are probably the lowest they have been throughout the season. After that loss to the Denver Broncos, hearts were broken. My heart was broken. If you're a Giants fan watching this, your heart was broken. And then you go into the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and really the heartbeat of your football team, Cam Skattebo, goes down with a nasty injury like he did. He is now out for the season. This was never a team that was going to make a Super Bowl run, but we were hoping this was a team that could be maybe in the hunt graphic when we got to November. But now you're also being kind of struck by lightning by the injury gods. Cam Skattebo out for the year. Malik Nabers out for the year. Last week against the Philadelphia Eagles, Paulson Adebo, your star corner, didn't play. Javon Holland did not play. And this roster is just not deep enough to take those kind of hits. So I guess where we're at right now is there's 9 games left. Really a sample size for Brian Daboll to keep his job, to really get a better evaluation of where this roster is at with Joe Shane. And really the only reason I'm waking up, Chase, on Sunday morning still excited is to watch Jaxson Dart play football. Kyle Shanahan was very complimentary of the way he has played, and I know the Niners are a little bit thinner than they were at the start of the year on defense, but I'm excited to see how Robert Saleh game plans and tries to stop Jaxson Dart. Over the last couple of weeks, teams are trying to keep him in the pocket a little bit more. I know the Niners aren't the best pass rush team, but Saleh, one of the best in the business, I know he's going to be creative, and he might just throw the kitchen sink at the rookie.
Really impressed by what Jaxson Dart's been able to do. And in the pre-draft process, I know you and I were big fans of his. His ability to create plays out of structure, improvise is highly impressive. He has a really good pocket feel. Throwing the football, we knew that he had a really good arm, but I think he's been even better in that regard, in that area, especially considering that, as you said, Malik Nabers out for the year. He's probably throwing to one of the worst, if not the worst, wide receiver rooms in the NFL. So he's really been able to maximize guys around him. I'm interested to see how the Giants adapt not having Cam Skattebo, because he was so good for them. And that was another player who I liked for the Niners in the pre-draft process. Sticking with Dart here, his ability to extend plays is something that Kyle Shanahan had specifically mentioned on Wednesday. And if the Niners can't get to him, I think that could spell a lot of trouble for the Niners. And that's been a big problem for San Francisco because their pass rushing numbers this year are gross. Total sacks, 9. That's 30th among the 32 teams. Total pressures, 86. That ranks 28th. Total hurries, 70. That ranks 18th. Their pressure rate is 29.25%. That's dead last in the NFL. And their sack rate, second to last in the National Football League.
Yeah, not great. And look, the Giants' offensive line, it's been better this year. Andrew Thomas is back to playing at an all-pro level. Jermaine Illuminor's playing well before he gets to a contract extension this spring. He's also coming off an injury. He's playing through a pec injury that he suffered against the Eagles. And Chase, I know you got to watch the Giants-Eagles game. You kind of saw the Eagles in the first half they kind of just went after Jaxson Dart, but in that second half, it was almost just like a mug rush where they were trying to keep him in the pocket, trying to get him to win from in the pocket, and that's kind of the next step for Dart. The playmaking, it's obvious. Everybody sees it. He has great pocket feel. He can get out. He can make that second play, improvise, create. He's really good in the scramble drill as well. But the Niners, I think, might, as you talked about and have painted very well, aren't a great pass rush team. Maybe they just try to get him to stay in the pocket and throw to receivers who, quite frankly, for the New York Giants, aren't very good, don't create separation, and aren't really being schemed up open all that often.
Up until last week, I actually thought the Giants' offensive line had been playing well. Then they had their worst game of the year. The Eagles had 22 pressures and 5 sacks of Jaxson Dart. That was by far Philadelphia's best pass rushing game of the year. But for the Niners, since that Nick Bosa injury, they probably had their worst game at getting after the quarterback. C.J. Stroud last week had all day to throw. The Niners had 10 pressures as a team and 0 sacks, and that led to C.J. Stroud probably having one of his best games since his rookie year. So was that just a down game for the Giants offensive line, you think? So, obviously, the revenge factor was huge for the Eagles.
4 of the 5 sacks were technically charged to Jaxson Dart. So sometimes in life, your biggest strength can be your biggest Achilles heel. He holds on to the football. Is that because people aren't open? People aren't getting open? I think there's a little bit of both of those things. But I thought he held on to the football a little bit longer than he usually had in that game against Philly. I went back and I watched the all-22 film. There also wasn't people open, so it's a double-edged sword there. 4 of the 5 sacks charged to him. So I know Jalix Hunt, I believe is his name, right? Yep. He got the best of Andrew Thomas a couple of times. Interested to see how the Giants' O-line bounces back. Want to see Dart remain on schedule while trying to balance the fact of winning in the pocket, letting it rip when you see it, but also still being that playmaker that you've been, that have helped you be so successful so far this year.
And for the Niners along the defensive line, they make the trade this week for Keon White. I imagine he's going to play because the Niners, before that trade, had 2 healthy defensive ends on their 53-man roster. They also added Clelin Ferrell to their practice squad. He had 3.5 sacks and started every game for the Niners back in 2023. So some reinforcements for San Francisco, and Robert Saleh has done a great job of making chicken salad out of chicken shit this year with all of the injuries that have happened on defense to Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. Against Houston, though, that was one of the games where everything that he called, everything that he devised and drew up, it just didn't work. And when the Niners blitzed, they got exposed on that back end. Sticking with the defensive line, but for the Giants, one of the biggest concerns that I have in this game from the Niners standpoint, we're not sure who's going to play at quarterback. Pretty sure it's going to be Mac Jones, who's immobile. Brock Purdy coming off that turf toe injury. I doubt he plays because he's not quite 100%. Plus, that MetLife turf, probably not great for his turf toe, but a huge matchup in this game. The Giants' defensive line, one of the best personnel-wise in the NFL, against the Niners' offensive line, one of the worst in the NFL. This could be a game, Marsh, Giants fans, where the Giants' defensive line could take over and really get after it.
Yeah, they're going to have to. Look, this back end of the Giants defense, it's pretty beat up. Cordell Flott still dealing with a concussion after he got punched in the face by Bobby Okereke in the Eagles game. He had to leave that one. Paulson Adebo, he has not practiced this week after not playing last week. So you could potentially be down your CB1, your CB2, Art Green, a depth piece. He has been injured as well. So you're going to see a lot of Deonte Banks out there. And we saw Jalen Hurts last week. Where number 2 was, that's where I'm going with the football. Deonte Banks has not been a good football player in the National Football League, and the Giants secondary is light. So you're going to need an Abdul Carter game, and we are getting so close. He caused havoc in that Eagles game. Drew a holding on Lane Johnson. He forced a 22-yard sack against Jalen Hurts where Brian Burns cleaned it up. That multi-sack game is coming. I'm hoping it's this week against the San Francisco 49ers. Brian Burns, 10-plus sacks this year already. Dexter Lawrence. A lot of stuff going on with him.
Called out by Carl Banks.
Yeah, Carl Banks called him out. Then he called Carl Banks delusional. They played him more at nose tackle against the Eagles than they had before. That's his position where he is the best. And I've done my research as well. I see the Niners aren't that great at the interior offensive line this year. I know the bookend tackles are still playing well. But Dexter Lawrence needs to dominate the interior offensive line for the Niners, who, Chase, you know all and well, have not been all that great this year.
Yeah, I'll say if there's a game for Dexter Lawrence to get back on track, and he's long been one of the best nose tackles, defensive tackles in football, it's this game, especially if he lines up over Connor Colby, who is last in pressure rate allowed among left guards in football. Rookie 7th-round pick out of Iowa has really struggled. Yeah, Matt Hennessy, who is the backup center. He's starting in place of Jake Brendel. And then Dominic Pooney, a 3rd-round pick from 2024. He has struggled this year. We'll continue to preview this game coming up just around the corner, but let's get to our sponsor here on the 49ers Report and Giants Now. This episode brought to you by PrizePicks. The hard-hitting football action, even better with PrizePicks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right, it never gets old. So keep the season rolling on PrizePicks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Very easy to play. You get your picks in less than 60 seconds. You choose more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And this is the #1 fantasy sports app in North America. Join the millions of users and sign up today. And PrizePicks has a couple of new features. It's the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Jaxson Dart's pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup only on PrizePicks. Follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app. Copy their lineups in one click, whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just somebody whose picks you like. Hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. 3-pick power play for Niners Giants. More on Christian McCaffrey's receiving yards at 45.5. More for a half George Kittle rushing or receiving touchdown. And then Jaxson Dart, the young stud, more than a half passing touchdown. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So we talked about the Giants' defensive line. Marshall mentioned some of the secondary struggles for New York this year. That's been obvious when you watch games or you look at the tape. Another thing that I want to point out here, the Giants' run defense this year, it's been one of the worst units in the NFL, if not the worst. Yards per carry allowed, they're 32nd among 32 teams. EPA per rush given up, 32nd in the NFL. Success rate given up is also dead last. But then you have a Niners team that historically under Kyle Shanahan with the outside zone has been able to be one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. That hasn't happened this year. The offensive line has been bad. You've been without a lot of marquee players at the receiver, tight end spots because of a lot of injuries there. And so that's impacted the run game too. Not having Brock Purdy obviously takes away the mobility threat at the quarterback spot. Maybe Christian McCaffrey's lost a half step, but he's looked pretty damn good. What the Niners did a couple of weeks ago against Atlanta, Kyle Shanahan said, the goal in this game is to play bully ball. We're going to run it about 40 times. And they found a lot of success running it. Now they went from outside zone to more gap and power. They found success. Maybe they do that in this game, but it wouldn't surprise me, Marshall, if early on you see the Niners really tried to establish that run game.
And they should run the ball outside the tackle. Shout out to my guy Justin Pennick of Talking Giants, pulled this awesome stat. Well, not awesome, but the New York Giants, they allow 7.9 yards per carry outside the tackle. That's the worst in the National Football League. That's a whole yard worse than the 31st best rush defense outside the tackles. So I've already had nightmares this week of the Christian McCaffrey get-right game. You get back to that zone scheme that Shanahan is famous for, and it's 15 yards this way off the tackle, 15 yards this way off the tackle. So I'm absolutely worried about that. I know a lot of people have been saying it's because, Marshall, we're not good on the defensive line stopping the run. That's a part of it, but I think this is more to blame with the lack of talent you have at the off-ball linebacker spot. Bobby Okereke has not been the same player he was just 2 years ago. Darius Muasau, the second-year linebacker out of UCLA. Maybe some Niners fans know who he is. He has not been good in the National Football League. So, yeah, if you're Kyle Shanahan and you want to get back to 49er football of smash mouth, we're going to run it down your throat, you're playing the best team to do it. The Philadelphia Eagles, they had their get-right game running the ball last week with Saquon Barkley. Second play from scrimmage, 65 yards down. the left side. I'm worried about that, Chase. I'm also worried about the Giants trying to guard Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield as a wide receiver. The numbers that I saw this week, I was shocked how much they're throwing him the football and how successful he has been in those areas. Do you see that happening again this week? I mean, why would you go away from it at this point? The Giants linebackers can't cover. They can't tackle. And if you want a big play, go at number 27. Tyler Newman, he has really struggled in his second year out of Minnesota.
Yeah, he had that bad angle, too, on the Saquon run that went for 65 yards. And very few running backs, as Giants fans are very familiar with, who can beat the safety to the sideline like that, and then it's deuces on the way to the paint. So going back to Christian McCaffrey, so the Niners definitely will utilize him as a pass catcher. He's such a filthy route runner from the slot. His pops was an All-Pro and a Super Bowl champion at wide receiver. Ed McCaffrey for the Mike Shanahan Broncos teams that won Super Bowls and made it to Super Bowls with John Elway as a quarterback. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's brother, Luke McCaffrey, turning into a solid wide receiver for the Washington Commanders. So his footwork and his route running from the slot, very impressive. Obviously, he'll catch some screen passes out of the backfield. A lot of it, though, Marsh, has been Mac Jones, Brock Purdy. They go through their progressions, and because the Niners are so short-handed at wideout, nobody's open because they don't have a lot of explosiveness there. And so the last read of the play, okay, nothing's open. Let's dump it off to McCaffrey. He still has some wiggle and burst. He can make guys miss in a phone booth, and he can pick up yards to rack up some of those receiving yards. But you're right. He has 56 catches this year. That is number 2 in the NFL behind Jamar Chase. And then as far as
amongst
receiving
all players,
yards,
not just running backs.
Exactly, who Jamar Chase, in my opinion, is the best wide receiver in football. And then he has 559 receiving yards. That's behind Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jamar Chase, George Pickens, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Smith, Emeka Egbuka, and then McCaffrey's right there. So it's ridiculous what he's doing this year. He's on pace to have a 1,000 season, and he's done that, I think, once before in his NFL career. Chip giving me the nod on that because we were looking at those numbers last week. And so that is a way to target kind of a weakness for this Giants defense. I do want to ask you about the Giants defense. I know Shane Bowen has come under criticism in the city of New York and for Giants fans everywhere. The famous on the Broncos game-winning drive, rush 3, drop back 8. Has that just been a consistent problem, just play calling and scheme that doesn't really make sense in the moment of games?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the game against the Dallas Cowboys in week 2. You should have closed that game out where Dak Prescott throws an 18-yard ball up the seam to get you in field goal range. The game against the Denver Broncos. The Giants have just not been good situationally on defense to close out games. And then when their defensive line does put them in advantageous situations, they do not capitalize. 2nd and 35 last week, and Tank Bigsby, or 2nd and 31, and Tank Bigsby rips off a 35-yard run to move the chain. 25 of 35 times where the Giants defense has had the opposing offense in first or second and 11-plus yards, they've gotten a first down. That makes no sense. So even if you're the Niners and you suffer a sack on first down and it's 2nd and 12, 2nd and 18, the drive is not dead. You can keep it alive. For Shane Bowen, look, he has not been great. But the players at some point, they need to execute as well. So it's the classic are they bad because of the players? Are they bad because of the play call? I think it's a mix of both. And I don't really believe in the way that Shane Bowen operates on defense. Like when you think of the New York Giants in their heyday, fast, physical, aggressive, downhill. Shane Bowen is bend but don't break. Let's let them make a mistake and not force it. We're going to be passive. And overall, this defense, it is just a slow defense sideline to sideline. And that is why I see a big game coming for Christian McCaffrey. I really do.
Yeah, and one of the big storylines for this game as well, this game is big for the Niners, right? The difference between 6-3 and 5-4 going into the NFL trade deadline, which is coming up on Tuesday, that's a big swing. And obviously for the Giants, the sole focus right now is the development of Jaxson Dart. For the Giants, there is a pass rusher who Niner fans very interested in, and I am as well. That's Kayvon Thibodeau, who I think would be a good scheme fit, under contract next year, can get after the quarterback. He's good against the run. There's been a lot of chatter that maybe he gets moved. Is there any chance that he could just hop on the plane with the Niners, come back to Santa Clara? Do you think he gets dealt?
I mean, look, are the Niners going to offer a first-round pick? I think the Giants would have to listen. I mean, look, I did a video. I want to keep Kayvon Thibodeau. In my 5 years of covering the Giants here, I've learned one thing. Talent or roster as many talented football players as you can, no matter the position and no matter how much depth you have at the position, especially the guys that you draft and you develop. That's the blueprint for good football teams in this league. Draft good players, develop them into good, better players, and retain those players. The Giants, under Joe Shane, they have not really done that. So I know you have Brian Burns. I know you got Abdul Carter and Dexter Lawrence. But Kayvon Thibodeau is a good player. He's having his best year in the NFL. There's a reason other teams want him now, because he's playing good football. I'm hoping I see Kayvon Thibodeau maybe sack Mac Jones a couple of times. And, Chase, I wanted to ask you, in the, 6 games Mac Jones has actually started this year, I didn't even realize it was that high. What has he done well when the offense looks good with the Niners with Mac Jones? How are they moving the ball? How are they putting up points? They're 4-2 in the games he started this year. So I think if you're a Niners fan, you could say it better than me. You got to be pretty happy with the way he's played. And I think Giants fans may be looking at it, oh, Mac Jones, we got to win. I would kind of pump the brakes on that.
Mac Jones has played great. I mean, anytime you can have a backup quarterback go 4-2, and up until last game, he was leading the NFL in passing yards per game, you'll take that. I think he's filled in really nicely for Brock Purdy. Obviously, they are different quarterbacks. Brock Purdy, like Jaxson Dart, different players, but in the same sense, going to be able to create. He's going to be able to buy time and either make a play downfield with his arm out of structure, or he's going to be able to utilize his legs and pick up chunks of yards on the ground. Mac Jones is more of that pocket quarterback who's not going to move around all that much, but he does have a good pocket feel. I'd say he also has a better deep ball than Purdy. Sometimes he can make that opposite hash to opposite sideline throw better than Purdy, put some more velocity behind the football because he does have a stronger arm. He's also a bigger athlete. And another thing, too, when Mac has played well, he's been protected. They've gotten the ball out on time. When he's played poorly, it's really not on him. It's because this offensive line has been horrible, and he's gotten a pass rush right up the gut, which blurs his sight line as a quarterback. It muddies up the pocket, and he's had no chance back there. So all things considered, we've seen why Kyle Shanahan really liked Mac in the pre-draft process in 2021, why for a little while he advocated for the Niners to take him ahead of Trey Lance. He does a great job of running the offense, playing point guard, getting rid of the ball on time accurately to his playmakers.
This is such an interesting game because the things the Giants do well, the Niners don't do good at stopping it.
Yeah.
What the Niners do well, the Giants don't do good at stopping it. Giants can rush the passer. Niners don't block all that well. The Niners are struggling to run the football. The Giants don't stop the run well at all. So while we've talked about it could be a get-right game for the Niners, there's still a part of me that believes the Giants could win this football game. Not the most talented receivers. Still no Brandon Ayuk. I know you're thin at corner, but this is a game I do think the Giants can win. Vegas has the Niners as 2.5-point favorites. Cross-country flight, so 5.5.
Early body clock game for them on the West Coast. Yep.
I could see us going multiple ways. I expect McCaffrey to have a good game, but what if Dexter Lawrence comes out and dominates a weak interior offensive line? He muddies up that pocket for Mac Jones, and he can't escape. That's kind of where the Giants have been burned sometimes. We've seen Dak Prescott extend plays. We've seen Jalen Hurts extend some plays. We saw Bo Nix extend some plays. So, look, I think if I had to bet, I would maybe lean towards the Niners, but I might hedge and put some money on Giants' money line as well.
Look, the 2 games that Mac Jones has lost as a starter, against Tampa Bay, against Houston. What did those 2 teams do very well? They were relentless in getting after Mac Jones, beating up on an inferior offensive line. So there is certainly a reality here in which this Giants defensive line, personnel-wise, one of the most talented groups in the NFL, they can take over this game. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Niners lose this game. I do think it's going to be a close one. We're both going to be live for watch parties on our channels. Giants Now, San Francisco 49ers Report. Been having a blast doing these previews, bringing in a different perspective from some great talented people here at Chat Sports. Hopefully you enjoyed it too, and subscribe to our channels. We'll see you Sunday.